and anyone can tell. You think you know me well.
The distinctive voice there of Van Morrison, I'm sure you picked that up, but did you know that he's singing there with his daughter Shanna? I did not know that. I didn't know she could sing and sing so beautifully. Singing, of course, the song that always introduces this Friday morning conversation, You Don't Know Me. You certainly do know the person to whom I'm about to speak. It's Christine Nixon AO. For years, the Chief Commissioner of Victoria Police, during some very controversial times and some challenging times, as that job always is. She's recently been announced as the Chair of Leadership Victoria, and we thought what a great opportunity to get her to answer the well-known questions for You Don't Know Me. Christine Nixon, good morning. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too, Virginia.
Where have you been all these years?
Well, I've been around and busy and doing lots of different things, so it's really nice to catch up.
What did you do immediately after Victoria Police?
Well, of course, I ran the recovery from the 2009 bushfires and did that for about 18 months, and that was an amazing experience to spend that time across all of Victoria and helping communities rebuild and recover. And then I think I wrote a book which kind of got to be slightly controversial called Fair Cop.
Yes. And
I remember actually, perhaps was with John was here, I think. And,
that's right.
I was interrogated about that. And then I started to think about what I wanted to do next. Took a bit of time to think about it. But I've been on Melbourne Monash University Council and Monash College and not-for-profits and teach leadership and but really enjoying myself.
So the position you've taken here at Leadership Victoria, first of all, what is Leadership Victoria?
Right. So it's an organisation that goes back about 30 years ago, not the same name, but you might have remembered it was called the Williamson Leadership Program. And it was a great program started 30 years ago by a man named Williamson who put some money aside to try and bring people together from across Victoria to develop their leadership skills. So I first became aware of it, obviously, when I was the police commissioner and used to send senior police to be part of it. But often it was 30 or 60 people who would go through a program, sometimes different lengths. And it was a great way for, to develop leadership. And so that was where it started. About 10 years ago. Yep. It then expanded, but it runs programs for women, not-for-profits. But it's really focused on having people understand themselves as leaders and spending time with the group, doing a whole range of projects, and then, sort of looking to see, okay, what difference can I make in my own communities?
Is it self-selecting? Do you put your hand up and say,
yes, you do.
I'd like to be able to do that?
Yeah. And people will, there's scholarships, but also, say in Victoria Police, they would pay for the person. It would be part of a development program.
Is it very expensive to do the course?
Well, I think I'm probably a bit short on understanding that. It's reasonable cost, but there are scholarships for anybody who's got financial, difficulties or their organisation might. So there are scholarships available to support people. But when it's a government department or a bank or one of the other organisations, then they pay, and that kind of balances it off. So I saw an advertisement for this chair, and I thought, that might be something useful for me to do. So I applied,
and lo and behold.
Yes. So this is about my first couple of weeks. So you're very early in this process.
Well, we'll come back to you later on and maybe find out what's going on with the job. I'll get to some of the questions in a moment. But you reminding me of your bushfire recovery work prompts me to ask you, particularly given that we've just had this federal election, it's staggering to me, and of course, so many others who have observed this, that so many years after the 2019, after, the dreadful bushfires that we all endured down the East Coast, there are still communities there on the South Coast of New South Wales whose homes have not been rebuilt, for whom the money has not been distributed. Do you have any insight into that or any commentary you'd like to offer about that?
It is very sad, first of all, and I feel very sorry for many of those people, because what happens in such a terrible bushfire is the enormous amount of trauma. So there's kind of different stages communities go through, but there's also different stages individuals go through. So in some cases, perhaps some of those people who haven't rebuilt, are just not in a place to rebuild. I remember with our fires, people, significant proportion made choices to leave. They were in often quite isolated locations where some of those fires were. And so they chose to leave. The government, I think, is come a long distance. And certainly in our fires, we fought very hard for the properties to be cleared up, because we knew that if that didn't happen, then people really couldn't come to terms with it, couldn't often figure out what to do. So I think what happened with us is we provided villages for people to live in. They were built in Kinglake and Marysville, Flowerdale, places like that, so people could stay close to their communities. We did, in fact, clear the properties, and they were cleared within 3 months. Big contract with Grocon. We had 3,000 properties that were damaged, and they were cleared in that time. So I think we've learned a lot of lessons, but sometimes what I watch is we forget them as you move into a new disaster situation. People, move on. People don't want to look back and go, well, what did we learn out of the last, that kind of our disaster and our fires?
Why do they do that? Why do people not want to? It seems to me it's the first thing I'd want to do is say, so what happened last time?
Yeah, and
what
that's
can we
what we
take
did.
from that?
And that's what we did. We wanted to go, we went back, we went to New Zealand, we went to a lot of other locations and said, well, what were the lessons? And then we put together sort of a 5-point model that said, okay, we need to look at businesses, we need to look at the environment, we need to look at the community itself. But at the heart of all these things should be the community decision making. Yeah. And we should facilitate that. I've been watching, perhaps you did, the sort of the Republic of Malakuta, the show that was, gosh, it was familiar. Every time I kind of saw one of those episodes, it's very tough, but people in communities should be involved. It's the best things for them to happen, to be part of it, but it's tough. And they need support from the federal government and particularly state, I think, who are much closer to it, and local government to help them.
Do you have any particular insight into what's going on there in the south coast of New South Wales and even the very northern parts of Victoria to understand why it's been so slow?
I called up the people who were leading the recovery.
Oh, did you? Yeah, okay.
I did, and I can't not want to contribute or want to say to people, look, here's some lessons we learned. And some of them took that on board and others didn't. I think there's quite a variation actually in what happens in New South Wales and what's been happening in Victoria.
So what you're saying there is you called up those people and said,
I called the leaders.
Hi, can I help?
Yep.
And you didn't get very far.
Well, they kind of had a conversation with me and I explained to them, I told them to go and read. We wrote a lot of documents and I was very keen that what happened after the fires was documented. We reported monthly at one point, then every 3 months, and then there was very solid reports about what had happened. So communities could know what was possible. But we also had, I suppose, a bit different in this case, is we had a $410 million fund. It was the largest fund ever raised in supporting communities. And so we were also able to use that to support a lot of communities too. But the lesson people need when these kind of things happen is communities and those leading the recovery need to go back and look and take those lessons and go forward.
Christine Nixon is with you answering the questions and you don't know me. Let's get to some of them. You'd never know it, but I...
Well, this was kind of an accidental thing that happened. And interesting, you're talking about the south coast of New South Wales. So before I came to Victoria, I was the region commander for the best region in the world, really. It was that south coast of New South Wales all the way to the Victorian border, around Canberra. And I was the region commander there, and we bought a farm. But the piece that people would probably not quite really think about is we were there and we had a friend who used to look after the property and stay with us occasionally. He came to me and said, Christine, there's a farmer who has a lot of Clydesdale horses and he's going to shoot them. There was a drought and he couldn't look after them. And he said, I think you should buy them. So we bought.
How many?
6 Clydesdales to start with. Do I know anything about horses? No.
What do you mean to start with? How many have you got now?
I'll get to the rest of it.
But, okay.
But what happened was we bought those because we did have land and just in Camargo, actually, on the hill.
Oh, my goodness. Right.
On the hill above Camargo. And it was a lovely property, beautiful.
I know that part of the world very well.
Yes,
it is absolutely beautiful.
I know you do. And it was, an ideal place. But so we bought them, and of course I could feed them, of course, because I had a job and was able to do that. But they were the most amazing animals. And it got us started on the Clydesdale Society and being part of it. But the second piece was he had a stallion. And he wouldn't originally part with the stallion, but he couldn't support the stallion either. No. So we bought the stallion. And I remember one day at this farm, they brought the stallion to us in the back of a truck, and it was like, oh my gosh, he's 18 hands, he was 1,000 kilos, and this stallion arrived. But he was the most beautiful horse. And so we started on this for about 10 years. We had horses, and we ended up, I think the most we had was about 11. We bred a beautiful foal. And so I learned all about these things that I knew absolutely nothing about before.
You're a horse breeder. You're a horse owner and a horse breeder.
I was. Well, we got out of that after a while, but
Right.
And it was a great experience. And the chief, as he was called, the horse, the Yambula chief, was the most beautiful horse. Other people couldn't really deal with him, and you have to be careful of stallions. But somehow or other, he used to really love me, and I thought, you like me because I pay the bills.
What is it about horses? They really are phenomenal creatures, aren't they? Once you got up close to them, what did you see?
It was just this kind of closeness. And sometimes, he would come into the garden, and I'd be just working in the garden at some point in my sort of rare weekends we got to be there, because this was during the time I was the commissioner, and he would just come and breathe over me. I go away in huge feet. But they were lovely horses, and it's just a great time. And so, but in the end, about 2008, they all went with our friend who had got himself a farm, and
Right.
they went to New South Wales. So they all left on the truck, and that was my horse phase. Maybe people didn't know about that.
I did not know about that at all. You've been a copper for a very, very long time, but was there a fork in the road that you almost took?
Well, there was. And I think for all of us, there's those sort of sliding doors.
Oh, yeah.
But there were two, really, that I think are interesting for me. The first one was back, actually, when I was thinking about the decision to become a police officer. So I was 19. And this might surprise you, Virginia, but that's 50 years ago today, or not today, close to today, that I became...
Say happy birthday, okay.
Not quite. I was 19, so I was really young. I mean, I applied when I was about 18 and a half. But anyway, so what happened at that point is I was thinking... Before I applied, I was thinking about what I want to do and what would my life look like. And there weren't a huge amount of choices. I hadn't worked all that hard, and university was very expensive. And so I thought, well, maybe I could work at Coles. And I had worked in Coles Variety Store in Manly, where I come from, for years, part-time. And so I kind of thought, well, maybe I could be part of the management team. And they had young men who were, assistant store managers, and there was a really quite strong program. So I thought, that's what I'll do. I'll head down that path. And I remember having a discussion with the manager of the store. Now, I'd worked there for about 4 years. I'd ended up doing pays. I'd worked all the counters, all that stuff. And I said to him, okay, so I think I'd like to join your management program. And he kind of gave me this look, and I went, why are you looking at me like that for? He said, have you not noticed? I said, well, what have I not noticed? He said, they don't take women. They only have men in the program. I went, what? And he said, oh, no, you're not suitable, and you're not a bloke.
And that was the end of that.
And that was the end of that. And
Amazing.
But I have to say, some years later, I gave a speech out at Coles when John Fletcher was the CEO.
And you told the story.
I did. And I said, you could have
not?
had me. So I guess that was one. And, there are others. I went to America and studied in 1984. I won a scholarship to go to America to do a master's degree. And I was coming back, and a friend of mine was working. It was the very early days of Macquarie Bank, and she was working for Macquarie Bank, and she said to me, there's a big change going on from Hill Samuels, what they used to be, and then to be Macquarie Bank. She said, why don't you come in on the ground floor?
Oh, my goodness. You could
work?
have joined the Millionaires Factory.
And anyway, I said, no, I think I owe too much.
You could have bought any Clydesdale going around if you've been working there. Christine Nixon is answering the questions, and you don't know me. I don't know. I think I might know the answer to this next one.
Mm-hmm.
The time I got it terribly wrong was...
Well,
Shall we go there?
Look, there's a lot of views particularly I think in some cases, and some people are very willing to share those views about whether they think I got things wrong or what it might have been.
We're talking here, of course, about the night of Black Saturday when the fires came through, and you and I think others with you left for a period of time and went and had dinner at a pub around the corner from the control room, and then you went back. And this became the subject of the inquiry, and you were criticised in the inquiry for doing that it was a mistake mistake that you made. Would you say that was the time you got it terribly wrong in order to answer this question today?
I think so. You know what you do, and maybe this is a piece of advice to people listening, because what happens after something like that, and particularly when it became such a significant sort of issue, is, you know, you go round and round in circles for years, and you're kind of trying to think, what was I thinking? What happened? Why would that have been the case? Because it was so out of character for me, and so out of, you know, sort of any experience I've really had before and since. But the piece I guess what happens sometimes is you have to just move away from it. You've got to then get a much bigger picture view and try and say, okay, that happened, but that's not going to define me, you know, for the rest of my life. I have to learn from it. I have to move on, and that's in fact pretty much why I continued with the bushfire recovery as well, because of that. But, you know, I think, you know, there are many things we make mistakes about in our lives. Some of them, if you happen to be in a public place, public profile, you know, they get very much magnified. Do I think me not being there made any difference to what happened? I don't think it did, but that wasn't the point. Yeah. And I certainly, you know, have said otherwise, that clearly in the future no one will leave those sorts of control centres ever again.
No, they'll be on a camp bed for the entire time.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you say about you go around and around with it, and we all make mistakes, and some mistakes and the consequences, you know, stay in our mind longer than others. But with something as public as this, and you spoke about it in your book and talking about how, you know, the News Limited papers, in your view, you know, were part of taking you down with their campaign against you. Did you find it very hard to get it out of your head? Did you find it driving you crazy?
Yeah, and I did. And I felt like, you know, because the other part of it was, and therefore I should stand down from leading the bushfire recovery. And I remember you know, thinking, well, I'll just stay in my bed and pull the sheet over my head and stay there. But you can't do that when you have a responsibility for another task. And so it was really the number of the people who were involved in that recovery, and particularly families who, one particular family who lost young children in the fire, who were very much kind of basically said to me, Christine, get over yourself, and we want you to stay with us and continue. And I thought, you know, these people have been through so much more than me. Yeah. What I was criticised, and my reputation was damaged, and ego was damaged, they had lost so much more. So part of it that helps you is to get past it that way, is to get on with doing things that are valuable.
And a bit of perspective and a reality check. Christine Nixon is with you. The flip side, and we've changed our question just slightly in the last couple of days, thinking on it. How would you answer this one? It's a small thing, but one thing that I'm still so proud of is, it's a question about what you're proud of.
Wow. Well, I got to say, given we've been talking about this issue, I actually think we did a pretty good job in Victoria in responding to that bushfire. And in the time afterwards, it's not a small thing either. It's something where you can use your own power. And I talk a fair bit to people these days about using your own power, your own capacities, your own presence, to be able to support others. And I think, you know, what happened during that process is we did things in Victoria that had never been done before. To recover and to support people. So I think I'm really proud of that. I mean, there are many, you know, other occasions I've in my life where I was proud to become the first female, you know, police officer. I was a police commissioner. I was proud to become, you know, the first assistant commissioner in New South Wales. I'm proud to be appointed as Leadership Victoria. You know, a lot of the roles that I've taken on, I think, you know, are good uses of my skills and capacities.
We'll have to make these last questions quick fire because
we're
simply running out of time. Okay. I always.
What do I? You know, I think I always try and give people the benefit of the doubt. I try to be respectful. Until, you know, I lose, you know, they lose it, then I always try to do that and treat people.
That's not a police officer's instinct. Your instinct surely is to assume that I did it.
I think,
and that I need to go to jail.
You've come to the view that I'm not exactly a traditional police officer, but then again, neither are a lot of police officers like that.
Well, that's true. What about I never?
I don't know. Well, I suppose it's a bit like that too. I try not to jump to conclusions. It's not a never exactly, but I don't know exactly what. This is a tricky one, but I think I don't try and jump to conclusions. I have a wonderful friend who said, Christine, there's always three sides to every story. And so I never try and jump to the answer. I try to think about that.
That's a nice phrase. I'll remember that one. What's your secret pleasure, your guilty pleasure, Christine Nixon?
Now, this is one that started back while I was with the police. I'll be very quick. It was, I took up learning mosaics. Making mosaics.
Out of what?
Well, at that stage, it was just tiles from Bunnings and glass. So it was pretty basic. But I did a course with 5 women in my office because there was always blokes, and the 5 of us went for lunch one day and decided we'd do this course. Well, that was 20 years ago. And since then, I have continued to make mosaics. And in fact, I've been to Italy. I went to Spilimbergo in Italy to do a course, which is a mosaic university. I don't know if you know that one exists.
I knew that Ravenna in Italy has
Ravenna.
some extraordinary mosaics.
I've been to Ravenna.
Wow.
And stayed there, and Venice and various parts of Italy to study with a great group of mosaicists. I study with a wonderful woman.
Really?
And so 20, and you know what it was about? It was about having something finished. It was like I can see this in front of me, and it took me away from all of that time. But I just love it, and the creativity you can bring. So I've been doing mosaics of Van Gogh. A mosaic. I took a picture in the lovely botanical gardens at one point, and I've just recently mosaiced that.
And what do you mosaic it out
now
of?
I use Smalty and Hammer and Hardy. So Smalty.
Sorry, what?
Smalty is the most beautiful glass produced in Italy.
Right.
And very expensive, but I figured if I'm going to do this, I'm going to use the best quality materials.
Yeah.
The most magnificent glass.
And you hammer it in?
Yes, you do. You like the old days.
Right.
And if you think of all the beautiful mosaics that are around the world, they need maintenance, but they're all done Hammer and Hardy. People cut the mosaic tile and put it into the space.
What's the Hardy bit in that?
That's the anvil. That's the piece you kind of put,
okay.
Between the hammer and the Hardy, they call it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness! And how big do they end up being?
Well, some of them have been, I don't know, this big, which I know your listeners can't see this big, but others are sort of smaller. I've done a variety of them, but I have a workshop down the back of my house. In fact, I've had about 4 workshops in different houses, but I love it. And it's just been the nicest thing to do, and it's brought out creativity in me that I never knew about.
You must have to give away a fair few of these mosaics. You're not going to be able to put them all everywhere.
John keeps saying, they're on the walls,
That's. I reckon that's really going to interest Rochelle, actually. She's a crafty kind of person. But Christine Nixon's guilty pleasure is making mosaics.
I am the least crafty person.
Oh, come on, I just assumed you were.
I cannot sew on a button. No, I'm not joking. I hem things with a stapler, and it does the job, or double-sided tape. It's a very good friend of mine as well. I want to be crafty because it looks like it's fun and relaxing.
Yeah. The sneaky fixing of the hem just as you go out the front door with the double-sided tape. Come on, we've all done that, haven't we?
Oh, yeah, we have. Me too.
I get it from my mum. I've learnt all of my dodgy tricks from my mum. I'm like, why do you need to sew if you have a stapler?
I've got the problem now of actually, putting the thread through the needle is the real challenge.
You
for
need
me.
a magnifying glass.
Is that what it is? It gets further and further away from me. The 1.5s just don't seem to work. Christine, terrific talking to you. Thank you for answering these questions and doing so honestly and candidly in the way that you have. How long will you be at Leadership Victoria?
Well, I don't know if they ever told me how long the term is, but usually...
Did you read the fine print?
Probably not. But a board, usually you stay for about 6 years, and so that we'll see where it goes. But I think it's a great opportunity, and I'd love to see so many people put themselves forward for those leadership programs. And
I've sort of quickly asked you before I just chat to Rochelle, though. Do you reckon Lawyer X would have happened in Victoria under your watch?
Well, people suggest she did, actually.
They asked you, did she?
Well, I knew nothing about her. There it is.
And how do you rate policing in Victoria right now, do you think?
Oh, look, I still think it's a good organisation. People out there every day doing a tough job. I think they had a very tough time during the pandemic. And I think, some things happened during that perhaps if I was there they might not have. But it's a tough run. We had to do things in that pandemic that none of us imagined before.
Great
They're
to
a good
spend time with you.
organisation.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Rochelle, what are you up to today?
We're looking at homophobia within sport and in particular within the AFL and what needs to change so that, did you know that actually in the world, men's AFL is the